Good morning, everybody. It's 11 a.m. Saturday, January 21st, 2023. Making another insert and commentary on what's going on in relations to Mr. Usain Bolt and what's happening in Jamaica, and ultimately the connection between what happened to him and others, and I'll keep expressing others, and the problems we're having with corruption, specifically corruption in the Supreme Court of Jamaica. So pretty much just a quick insert. I observed that commentaries are still coming in, and rightly so, because it needs a lot of attention. But at the same time, I haven't seen much commentary on solutions. And I believe that solutions is what we should search for to avoid anything like this happening as frequently as it has been happening in Jamaica. And this is only being addressed because of the status or the recognition of Mr. Bolt on the local and international scene. Everybody's shocked that somebody would try to rip off a high target individual like that. So as we say, high target is quite visible, and you wouldn't think that anybody would pull a stunt like that. Just shows you how brazen these people are, because they have nothing called conscience or respect for the law or anybody else. And though again we keep focusing, or we're focusing currently on Mr. Bolt across the island and across the globe, especially in the Jamaican community, it is shocking that it took this length of time for us to even address issues like this when people have been screaming out. And I'll keep saying it. We have filed repeatedly with the fraud squad, with the Prime Minister's office, with the Minister of Security, Minister of Justice. Now, I'm not sure about Minister of Security. The Minister of Security is on Constant Spring Road, I think, just before you get into halfway through. Yeah, we did drop off a package there. But the Minister of Justice, I think that's his office. We dropped off on Old Hope Road, the Commissioner of Police's office in Kingston there, and we dropped off documents and met with officials at the fraud squad in just along Oxford Road, one of those tall buildings there, Oxford Road, New Kingston area. And we also met with them in downtown Kingston when they were on Duke Street, I think, and we met with them when they were on Orange Street in Montego Bay and just beside Cornwall College. And since they moved over to Summit Police Station on Sunset Boulevard or Sunset Drive in the Hip Strip area, we met with them about 2 or 3 times there, providing them with additional information. Next to Area 1, we went to Area 1 a couple of times to meet with officers there, and the Mocha, which is just down the road from Area 1. So I'm listing all those people that we've been talking to, reaching out to in the police force, and they have failed to act. I just learned of another agency since Mr. Bolt's thing came up, the Financial Investigative Division, I think it is. So we're going to send information over to them, since this is a financial matter, fraud, and see what they do with it. I don't remember ever sending anything over there. I didn't even know they existed, separate and apart from those agencies we contacted. So it's important that, again, we deal with this issue, and to avoid the future occurrences. Because why it's extremely important is that the economy and everybody in Jamaica and outside Jamaica that has an interest in Jamaica is affected by crime and this kind of fraud. it's easier. In fact, a lot of people have been so discouraged from coming back to Jamaica to live because of the crime and the fraud and you name it. If you're building a house in Jamaica and you find even the workers there, they're literally defrauding the persons building the house because they appear as if they are professionals in certain areas, and then they're not. And then when they screw up or mess up your building, they expect to get paid, and when they don't get paid, people get hurt. And it's difficult to even bother with it because you have to be concerned with so much arguments over simple matters when it comes to construction and simple stuff that professionals should not have to deal with when dealing with construction. I mean, returning residents, that's the biggest frustration for anybody building a house in Jamaica and live there. You have professionals who come there with the intention of delivering, whether they're masons, carpenters, and frankly, they mess up the job, and I said they expect to get paid, and they expect you to recommend them. And unfortunately, a lot of Jamaicans who are at home and work with these individuals, instead of telling people what they're about, and that they tend to mess up on the job and cost people money. If you have to repair a roof or fix a roof 5-6 times, it's a deterrent. Well, not deterrent, it discourages people from wanting to even be bothered. So hence the reason why a lot of us, Jamaicans especially, are retiring in Florida, in the Carolinas, in Georgia, instead of bothering with the headaches of going down to Jamaica. So fraud, as I said, exists not only in the form that took place with Mr. Bolt or is happening to us, but when people pretend that they are one thing and they show up and not be and collect money from it, that's fraud. And nothing has been done over the years to remedy that. A simple measure amongst the parish council would be to set up a board that registers masons, plumbers, make sure they are certified, and a facility where people could report problems with them, and so that you have a database where people coming into the island to look for persons to work can simply refer to that database, look at the complaints that are lodged against these persons, and so avoid hiring them. We went to the General Legal Council, and I personally wrote to them, and visited their offices in downtown Kingston, and I said, a lot of these issues with bad attorneys could be avoided if persons had a database that they could refer to and see which attorneys' complaints were made against. And their response was they couldn't do that, or they wouldn't do that, for whatever odd reason. I mean, if a public complaint or a private complaint is made against an attorney, it should be logged and the public should have access to it. They're not willing to do that, and that's simply because they want to continue to protect these attorneys. The other level of fraud that exists that persons tend to ignore and think it's okay is that what I've discovered, I think, based on my experience in the courts, it seems like judges tend to want to ensure that attorneys make money, because a lot of the times when they postpone issues, adjourn issues, refuse to rule on matters in a timely manner, and have repeated hearings after hearings, it seems like they're setting up an income stream for attorneys. A court is not supposed to do that. As I said, they have to run a business and they must operate like everybody else. If the competition is too much, then demand and supply, economics works. The industry will settle itself, but courts can't be structuring their operations so that attorneys make money. That's not what you're there for. And it's obvious that some of those are some of the issues that must be dealt with. So I said, again, and I'll keep repeating, my effort and our objective here is to get effect change that will ensure I don't have to, or anybody don't have to come and be wasting their lives making videos when we don't want to. We are not content creators for the internet. And they have talented people out there that does that. We're not interested in being on YouTube or Instagram or anything like that. We're not. But when you're forced to do something because nobody else will do it, then you have to. And that's some of the issues and some of the things I want to again remind Jamaicans that was sitting by and being complicit. Sorry. Every Jamaican or every victim that ignores these things and remain quiet about it are complicit in encouraging it. And when it happens to somebody else, everybody is out expressing shock. But I've been in and out of Jamaica for the last 20-30 years, like every month or twice a month, sometimes 3 times a month, and except for the COVID period, of course, which stopped a lot of travel. And I've been doing it less and less since I've been dealing with this issue with imminent threats against my person, and because of what's going on. We're not safe, and we know we're not safe, and we've been told to be careful. And in fact, friends and partners have been warning that we should be careful how we deal with this thing, because we don't know who's behind trying to swindle our properties and trying to keep us from collecting our damages or having matters dismissed or settled in accordance to the rulings of the court, which were in our favor, so that we could move on to our developments. And that's real, everybody knows this. So we have to be active, and I'm encouraging everybody to be active, reminding you that we have initiated a couple of things like a reward and willing to provide financing or funding to help resolve issues in the judiciary. Initiate at least, but that will go a far way in aiding and abetting the dismantling of fraud and corruption. Nothing else has happened to our matters since all of this started, and we're hoping that at least the persons at the courthouse who set matters to be heard will at least look and develop a little kind of empathy and conscience to now, try to fix the issues that we're facing. I don't know why this hardline policy as if, but we are going to go anywhere. And again, I applaud all the content creators on the internet that have been really blasting this issue about Mr. Bolt, because it is bringing attention to the fraud, and it is bringing attention to the fact that our politicians tend to close their eyes to the reality of what people face. And I just can't understand it, because politicians represent or should represent the people's interest. And if one person is being threatened, or their welfare being threatened in the economy or in the country, then it should be the concern of the Prime Minister. So it's a little disheartening that it's taking this to bring attention to that. Jamaicans, ordinary Jamaicans without celebrity status, are going through this on a regular basis, and there's no government support or measures to protect them. And one of the things that people tend to ignore is what I'm going to call the attempt to legitimize theft of people's property. And for example, in the banks, people have their money in the banks, and this has happened to us, where we had money in accounts, both local and US accounts, and when we went back for those accounts, they were drained under the guise that there were service charges. Now, you put your money in a savings account or a checking account in a bank, the bank is using your money, and then they turn around, charge you service charges, and rip off your account. So how much different is that from what happened to Mr. Bolt and the other persons. You know, one took it without permission. Why? You know, we didn't give permission to anybody to rip off our accounts. But you go in, and regardless of how little your money, how little the money you have in there, or plenty or how much, these people go in and drain your account. And if their interest was to protect your accounts, they would have contacted you during that period and said, oh, you need to keep your accounts active, or you need to do this to stop the bank. But they don't do it. They sit quietly and rip off your account, take out your money, and then when you go and they've stolen your money, because it's theft, your property, you didn't give them permission to take anything out of your account, then they tell you have to deposit money to reactivate your account. I have an account at a building society where we hadn't used it for years, had a little bit of money in there, and when we went to find out what was happening with the account, they said, yeah, the money is still in there, or they're not taking out any money, but we couldn't access the money unless we updated the account. Even though we had our IDs, information, everything, they knew it was us. They're telling us we have to go through a whole bunch of paperwork before you could access your own account. And some of the things that we're asking for was completely irrelevant and violates privacy, and then they're going to quote that, oh, the federal government. So every time they open their mouths and say the federal government, I'm asking them, is Jamaica now a state or a protectorate of the United States? And you're telling me about the federal government. Because when I go to open an account in an institution in the United States, a financial institutions, the things they're asking for in Jamaica, I am not required to produce. Right? I was glad when I heard the other day that the government had simplified the process by saying you just need 2 IDs to open an account at a bank now. So I hope it avoids the evasive questions and interrogation they want to put people through, and then have people's money that they then exploit, and no interest on your money. And a bank, once they're using your money, should be paying your interest instead of ripping out people's accounts. So I'd like for the government or the Minister of Finance or Bank of Jamaica or the FSC to go in and say how many Jamaicans have lost money in their accounts that these banks just simply sit there and suck it out on a monthly basis. And when people go there for their money, there's nothing left, and you have to deposit money to activate that account. And why should you have to activate an account? Because that's the other thing. If I have money there in my account and I'm not using it for 4, 5, 6 months, and I go, they're telling me, oh, I have to do stuff to activate the account. And so there are varying levels of theft and fraud that's allowed under government that should be protecting people and their money and their interest. Another covert ripping off of people in Jamaica is the cell phone companies that provide services. I have an account, or I have a cell phone account, well, with one of these companies, right? And you put money on your account, you purchase those minutes or whatever they want to call it, and you put it on your phone. It becomes your property. And then if you don't use your phone for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, when you go there, they're telling you, oh, you can't make a call until you put more money on your phone. When you already have money on there, and you had money on there before you left. So again, isn't that theft? Yeah, people's money, they purchase the minutes, that's their property now, they put it on their phone. And the cell phone companies tell them they can't use it or have access to it until they activate or put more money on their cell phone. And I'm not talking about anything that I'm hearing, I'm talking about my experience. So as a result, you have a phone, you get to Jamaica, and you try to call somebody to pick you up, or make a call to find out where's the person that's supposed to be coming for you. And because you told them you're going to be calling, And then you have to sit there, and if it wasn't for the charity of some of these informal taxis or other that's there, that say you want a phone call, then you'd be stuck there for a couple hours before the person that's supposed to pick you up say, wait a minute, I should have heard from you by now. So again, that's stealing, and the government allows it. You're stealing people's money, because when they purchase those minutes for the phone, and you're going to tell them they have to reactivate their phone to use your money, then that's a crime, and it must be addressed. It's simple things like this that allow people to sit in a country and think it's okay to keep robbing people, because that's what it is. When a cell phone company does that, they're robbing people of their money, and it's regardless of how much money is there. When a bank or banks are allowed to freeze people's account with money in there and tell them they have to activate their account or go through a whole regiment of supplying information for you to access your own money, that's a crime. I got so fed up and frustrated with them that I just left the accounts there. So they ate out my money and no account. So now they're talking about this woman that stole people's money by going in there and pulling it out. What's the difference? What the hell is the difference? So we have to, as I said, become more sophisticated, and people have to speak up and stand up, and politicians can't just sit there and allow industrial businesses to keep ripping off people because they're afraid of not getting contributions from these people. And again, I'll point out to you that our newspapers in Jamaica, our journalists, and I say so-called journalists, who are supposed to be protecting the nation from unscrupulous activity of all kinds, political, social, you name it, they should be commenting and making reports on these things, and they sit there, do nothing until after the fact, and then all of a sudden everybody is concerned, having all kind of big meetings and big discussions and news broadcasts, and going to places and showing apartment buildings and interviewing that person when they are already familiar with what's going on, and instead of taking care of the business of the people. And that's why, again, we are so liberal with the licensing we give to journalists. In fact, you can hardly sue a journalism organization now because of the updated defamation laws that were passed, because you're giving them leverage, and in some countries you can't even sue them unless it's really outrageous reporting. And yet people sit there. Again, I just don't understand how Jamaicans are so complicit. What's happening to people on the island, and you and us, is because we as a people sit there and don't do anything. We don't speak up, we don't act. I guess most of the activists that I grew up in Jamaica with, or the attitude, left Jamaica, because all we have there are people who are willing to jump on the one bandwagon shouting when something happens and refuse to act before. Preventative care, implement measures and make steps about matters that are concerning to the nation's well-being, instead of waiting until things happen. That's disastrous for everybody. You should stop supporting the press. Stop spending your money. Stop advertising. Those people who advertise with them, or keep buying their papers, or listening to them, go to social media. Start paying those persons, those content makers, who are out there screaming and exposing the truth as best they can. They're doing a better job than these newspapers and cable stations and news networks. They're a fraud themselves, because they're telling people they have the interest nation at heart, and they're representing what's happening in society, and they frankly sit on the news. Call it a cover-up. Call it the straight relationship that they're trying to sell. And that's what they've been trying to sell to me, is that when something is in the courts, they can't report on it. nonsense. There is no such law. And if there is a law that says that, that means the press is being what? Suppressed by government. The press in Jamaica is not being suppressed by government. So this nonsense about they can't publish or deal with things that are in the court, it's nonsense. No judge out there can stop the press from carrying news. Alright, so it's one thing for a court to say, put a gag order on a client, or somebody having litigation in the court. But the court can't put any gag order on the press. That's freedom of interfering with freedom of speech, freedom of the press. You know, the whole idea that we're going to sit around until disastrous things happen and report it and figure, we should be out there, then again, stop spending your money with them, stop investing in their stocks, because they have nowhere to go but down. Social media persons that are creating content and themselves don't list themselves as journalists, but they're certainly doing the job. Send the money to them, pay them, advertise with them, because we're getting better services from them. Now, they don't have any stocks and bonds out there that they have to have an interest to protect. They're just delivering the information that people need. And until we learn to understand that that's what we need to protect ourselves, and we're not going to have it. We're going to continue to have these things happening time and time again. This is short. It's Saturday. I'm going to try to get some walking in, and I'm hoping, I'm praying, because I do pray, that Christians and Muslims and everybody, every denomination you have in Jamaica will rise to the occasion. Rastas, stop just sitting quietly and talking about reparations. Protect yourself from criminal activity by these so-called white-collar persons, and protect your interests. It's one thing, you'll get your reparations, but you can take your reparations by protecting your interests now. Those of us who are jumping on that bandwagon as well, yeah, we deserve reparations. We've been ripped off and hurt, but we have to find ways to get it legitimately. And some of the ways to protect ourselves and make sure that we don't end up in that situation again is to be conscious and participate in your country's affairs. Now, I heard one content maker make the statement that's saying, people, that's why I don't believe in voting. I don't vote. Biggest mistake you can make. If you don't participate, then you shouldn't criticize. I understood what he was saying, but it makes no sense to not participate in your own country. Your power as an individual is to vote and remove and put in persons, remove people that's not supposed to be there doing their jobs, and put in other persons that are willing to say they're going to, and when they mess up, you move them as well. So don't buy into this argument that don't participate in democracy, because that's the same excuse a lot of us use when we say we're not getting involved with criticizing what's happening with the bank, criticizing government for their messing up. That's what happened. We have to participate and have a say. We have to go back to teaching people civics in schools. When I was in school in Jamaica, we were in primary school, we were learning civics, and therefore that generation that had that knowledge passed on to us and knowing our rights, then we were different people then. We were shouting out and participating in politics and ensuring that we didn't get abused, our rights weren't stepped on. And that's what set the pace for people now to have the kind of lifestyle they have. And it's not perfect, but certainly changes that took place in the police force, changes that took place politically and in government and government agencies, because we stood up and we spoke out. It wasn't because these people volunteered to do that. I remember the days when we used to come into the airport And customs officers, they were so abusive and nasty attitudes that you wonder why the hell you're coming back to Jamaica. And I'm not just talking, again, because I'm back and forth to Jamaica so much, because I'm like one of those people who have the trout syndrome. There's this magnet that's placed someplace in our psyche that we have to come back to this place, because there is just something special about here. And when you land and the kind of treatment you used to get from customs officials, you used to say, what the hell am I doing here? But because of constant complaints, it changed. People changed. And now when you get into customs in Jamaica or immigration, they're some of the nicest people you have there. Now occasionally I get on the person that doesn't say hello or smile or welcome home. But for the vast majority of people there, oh, they're pretty good. The same thing with the police force. There was a time when it was politicians, it was the police, and it was us, because of the attitude of the police, the JCF. Now, for those of us who don't remember the 70s and before, and the nature and attitude of the police, when they would come out and regardless of who you were, boy, do this, boy, do that, boy, drape you up, handle your woman, searching them physically, those things don't happen again. And that's because people spoke up. And a lot of these police came up through those eras and themselves realized that, this isn't civil. We can't handle our citizens like that. And I think they're a little more educated. I think the standard of the officers now are significantly better. I don't feel intimidated or threatened if I have to approach a police or one approaches me, regardless of what they're approaching me about. So there are significant changes that have happened in this country because people spoke up. And our country is being undermined because our economy is being undermined. And if that happens, then we're going to have a collapse. I keep saying, if you look at every failed state and every country, the first place that you have a major collapse in the economy, when an economy is collapsing, becoming a failed state, is the judiciary. And if the judiciary is allowed to continue to behave this way, then we'll become a failed state. If your rights aren't protected, become a failed state. And if the secrecy and lack of transparency is allowed to continue in our judiciary, it's going to continue. Again, it's not difficult to solve the problems that we're having in the judiciary. They're talking about backlog of cases. Why? The backlog of cases are caused because of the behavior, how judges handle the matters. Simple matters that could be ruled on. They're backed up because clerks hide files disappear, and people have to keep coming back and forth. So if we implement measures that prevent those, we prevent the backing up or backlog. Certain matters that come into the court should be dealt with expeditiously. You can have people's lives being tied up and their property tied up for 15, 20 years and think it's okay. For most of us, a lifetime is 20 years or less. And you tie up people's property in court for those periods of time without any kind of remorse or concern. And in fact, nasty attitudes in a lot of occasions. Jamaicans have to speak up against those things. Cases that are filed, a simple question and answer pamphlet or form, having people filling out those question and answers can be quickly scanned, either software develop a program and have it scanned and determine, is this case worthy to be heard? It should be categorized at that point. It could be automated, in short. That's what I'm saying. Every other major event in our lives, we have a question and answer form that we fill out before we go to the next stage. If you're applying for a visa, if you're applying for a passport, if you're applying for a license, if you're applying for anything starting a company, you have that form that you fill out. It goes in front of somebody, they scan it and check it, and then say, yeah, this goes there. This is, this is falls under the law. And again, it could be automated where it's not left to a human person to determine whether that person, if it's rejected, has the option of saying, I don't have to go spend a whole lot of money and waste my time. I don't have to go pick up attorneys who simply ignore that this matter is without merit and drag me through the courts and create a backlog of issues. So again, simple measures. We are amongst the most intelligent people on the planet, or so we used to claim. Yet we have some of the most anachronistic systems going on in our judiciary, which if it's not fixed, then that judiciary is going to drag us down and keep dragging us down to hell. Because when people get frustrated, after a point, and if you know what our people are like, when you get frustrated and you feel something doesn't belong to you and you have no interest, and what happens? They run wild and burn down everything. That's why we like burning tires so much and burn wood cross the road. It's part of us. When you're frustrated, people destroy stuff because they don't believe it involves anything of interest to them or is in their interest. So before we get to a hostile state and a state where people can't come out of their homes because they're going to be attacked by other people who are frustrated, if we don't fix it, we're going to continue to grow crime. If we don't fix it, we're going to continue to destroy the economy. And if we don't fix it, we're going to stop people from bringing their money down here to invest. And investing is simply not only people coming to open businesses, but people coming to reside. Because when they come here and they spend their money building a home, come here, spend their money buying food, spend their money going to entertainment places or in restaurants and beaches and supporting local vendors and businesses, they're building the economy. So if they don't come and spend, then you get knocked. And that's the problem. A lot of people are complaining about that. Oh, when the tourists come, they're locked up in the resorts. But can you blame the resorts? Because they become liable if anybody happens to come and get hurt. People look at them as being responsible and liable. And we have to understand that people can't survive in today's global economy without having income that can compete with inflation. Inflation, artificial though it is. Thank you, and you have a great weekend. And again, don't just ride the wave of what's happening to Mr. Bolt and those other persons as if this is so rare that it deserves burning down the house. It deserves to be resolved, and it deserves putting measures in place that will stop this from happening to not Mr. Bolt again or those other people, but to you and your children or your family who have money in the bank and the banks are ripping it off, or have a newspaper or newspapers or media houses that keep quiet on issues that needs to be dealt with, so we don't get into this situation. Because again, I'll say these people are complicit. Thank you. You have a great weekend, and God bless.